A little earlier in the title, we constructed this scene that resembles a bowling alley, using multiple modeling techniques to get the job done. We'll now add materials to the objects that we've built. The file has been renamed Bowling Alley for Materials and can be found in the Chapter 11 folder of the working files. Before we get to working on our skins, let's first save the viewport layout. We'll do that going under the Views pull-down menu, choosing Save Active Perspective View. Okay, why don't we start with the floor? Now, the surface will have a design that'll require mapping coordinates to be applied to the object. Let's select the object, then head into the Modify column, adding a UVWMap modifier. As for the mapping style, we'll change it from the default planar over to box. Okay, to build the skin, let's go ahead and open up the material editor. I'll do that by typing M. Working on the currently selected sample slot, let's name the material Floor. We can then apply it to the object in the scene with a simple drag and drop. For the skin's design, let's jump up on the Diffuse branch, then from the browser, choose Bitmap. We can then navigate over to the Chapter 11 folder in the working files. From there, let's choose the image named Flooring. Okay, so we can see the map in the scene. Let's click on the Show Shaded Material and Viewport icon on the horizontal row below the sample slot's right-hand side. Once we've done that, let's go ahead and render. As for the actual bowling alley, we'll again be applying a map to the diffuse branch of the material. Because of that, we're going to want to make sure that we have our mapping coordinates in place. Let's select the bowling alley object. That's the pink surface that you see in the view. With it selected, we'll add a UVWMap modifier. For this one, we can leave it set to the planar mapping style. Back in the material editor, let's select a clean sample slot, naming it Alley Boards. Like with the floor material, we can simply drag and drop it onto the object in the scene. Once in place, let's jump up on the diffuse branch, choosing a bitmap. This time around, at the top of the list, we'll choose the map named Alley Boards. Before loading, let's single-click on it, then in the lower left-hand corner, click on the button View. Let's go ahead and add that in. Once in place, let's activate the map being shaded inside the viewport. If we render, let's see how things turned out. Now, we might need to do a little work on the tiling. Let's zoom in a little closer and render again. To do that, I'll select the bowling ball, then hit Z. I'll then roll the wheel back a few turns to zoom out just a bit. Back in the material editor, let's change the W angle on the map to 90. That seems to have made quite a difference. Let's render again. Now, in most bowling establishments, the alley typically gets waxed at least once or twice a week. Because of that, the alley surface probably could use a little reflection. Returning to the material editor, let's click on Go to Parent. We'll then head down to the map section a little further down in the dialog. Let's jump up on the reflection branch, then from the browser, choose Ray Trace. If we now render, we can see the results. Okay, with that, we now have a mirror-like surface. Let's take the amount of the reflection down to around 15. We'll go back to our parent, then change the reflection amount down to the specified value. Rendering again leaves us with a more accurate and believable looking reflection. Let's now work on the two gutters. Back in the material editor, selecting a new clean sample slot, we'll name the material Gutter. Holding down the Control key, we'll now select both purple objects in our scene. Now, if you want to make sure you have them both selected, over in the right-hand column at the top, it'll read Two Objects Selected. To apply our material, let's this time use the Assign Material to Selection icon on the horizontal row of buttons. Let's now double-click on our sample slot, opening up a larger viewing window. Now, I'm thinking about a light blue skin. Let's jump up on the diffuse color swatch. Typing in our red, green, and blue values, let's use these numbers. We'll take red to 100, green to 125, and blue we'll leave at 150. When I've got the numbers in place, I'll simply click OK at the bottom right-hand side of the dialog. Now the gutters, though not typically waxed, are painted. Let's take the specular level to 35 and the glossiness to 35. That'll give us a little bit of a shiny highlight. Once we have our settings in place, we can close our large viewing window and render again. Okay, let's go ahead and close our render, then restore our view back to its original orientation. I'll do that using the Views pull-down menu, this time choosing Restore Active Perspective View. Let's now build a material for the backboard. That's the area directly behind the scoreboard. In our material editor, we'll select a clean sample ball, naming it Backboard. Now, for the color of the backboard, I'd actually like to steal that directly off our gutters. Let's move our material editor to the far left side and we'll render again. With the render open, I'll put my cursor in the middle of the window, then hold down the right mouse button. This gives me the opportunity of using the eyedropper to grab any material color in the scene. Let's put the dropper somewhere on one of the gutters. On the left-hand side, you'll see the color swatch. That color indicating the area of the scene that the eyedropper is over. When you're happy with the color in the swatch, go ahead and let go of the left mouse button. The swatch color in our rendered frame window can now be dragged and dropped over to the diffuse color swatch. When I get it on the appropriate slot, I'll let go, then choose Copy. Once we've done that, we can go ahead and close the render. Now, before applying to the scene, I would like to darken that up just a bit. Let's open the diffuse color swatch, changing the saturation to 150 and the value to 75. Once the numbers are in place, we can close the color selector, then drag the material onto the backboard object in the scene. Now, I'm thinking that wall area would be painted with a satin finish. Let's double-click on the sample ball, opening up a larger viewing window. To add just a little shine to our skin, let's take the specular level to 15. Very good. We can close the large window and render the scene. Let's now work on the back wall. Now this one will have a muted pattern. Because of that, we're going to have to add some mapping. Let's select the object, applying a planar UVW map modifier. Back in the editor, we'll select a clean sample slot, naming it Back Wall. Let's go ahead and apply that to the object in the scene. We can then open up a large viewing window. This surface I'm visualizing as looking a little bit more matted. For that, we'll change shaders. Under the shader basic parameters on the left-hand side, let's click on the button that currently reads Blend. To achieve more of a matted finish, let's change the shader to the Oren Nair blend. Now watch what that does to the shading in our larger sample window. With the shine on the surface now knocked down, let's jump up on the diffuse branch, choosing a bitmap. For this one, let's choose the image named Wall. Let's turn on the Show Map and Viewport button and we'll render the scene. Now, the map might need just a little bit of blurring. Let's do this. We'll close the render, then head back to our controls in the material editor. Down below the tiling settings, you'll see a control called Blur Offset. Let's change that value to about 0.02. Why don't we also see if we can better match up the map color to the other colors that we already have in our scene. For that, I'm going to add a color correction map. Just below the horizontal icons on the right-hand side, you'll see a button that reads Bitmap. Let's go ahead and click on that. That signals to Max that we're going to want to put something else up on this map branch. From the list, let's go ahead and choose Color Correction. When the message box pops up, we can answer Keep Old Map as Submap. Let's now take the saturation slider up to about 10. And controlling the hue shift directly above the color ramp, we'll crank the handle to the far right. Let's see how that new bluish hue looks in our scene. That'll do it for part 1 of our materials application. In our next video, we'll finish things off by adding skins to the remaining objects in our scene.